Hello, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and today we're going to cover all about parenting a sensitive child amongst siblings who are not highly sensitive or whose needs aren't as high as your sensitive child stuck in the meltdown cycle. So if you find yourself wondering whether or not you're resenting your sensitive kid for the extensive amount of attention that they require of you, or your sensitive teen for the extensive amount of attention they require of you, then be sure to stick around. We're going to cover how to break out of that pattern of feeling like there's an imbalance of love, care, and attention due to your sensitive kid's needs. So have you ever felt like you're resenting your sensitive kid, feeling like your other kids are resenting your sensitive kid in your own home because of the amount of time that it just feels like your sensitive child is sucking out of the room? All of the energy going into emotional experiencing, emotional management, emotional janitorial work that you might be doing, trying to sweep up the whole mess that is the meltdown cycle. And if that's the case, then make sure that we're going to dive into that today. Make sure you stay tuned, because we want to talk about this in the context of all of the families that we've helped and where you can get stuck, what you need to do to break out of the pattern, and one of the challenges that we see for parents of sensitive kids, and what is the responsibility of your sensitive kid, and what is the responsibility of you as a parent to break out of this pattern. Now, we hear from parents of sensitive children who are parenting multiple children all the time that they worry that the amount of attention that you're giving to your sensitive child is taking away from the amount of time that you can give, the amount of energy, right? Not just time, the amount of energy that you can give to your non-highly sensitive children, or to your children. They might be sensitive, but their behaviors aren't as intense or frequent or extensive, right? So again, let's talk about the meltdown cycle. What is it? If your child is hitting, kicking, yelling, screaming, threatening, life would be better off without me, you guys don't love me, I might as well not even be here, shutting down to the point where you feel like you have to pull teeth just to get your kid to the dinner table or to do any homework. All of that is related to the meltdown cycle of a sensitive child and a family dynamic that is stuck in the meltdown cycle. And this is true if your child or teen is dealing with these behaviors, demonstrating these behaviors on a daily, multiple times a day basis, or even multiple times a week basis. If your kiddo is having meltdowns on a daily, let alone multiple times a day basis, then it is not developmentally appropriate for your sensitive child to be experiencing that from ages 2 and up. And meltdowns frequently, even multiple times a week, are not appropriate for 4 and up. So if you're parenting an 8-year-old and you know your kid is going to lose their mind on a daily basis or every couple of days, and you're just walking on eggshells, make sure that you're listening to what we have to say here at MTC, because it's critically important that you notice that your child's behavior is not developmentally appropriate, even if they are sensitive. And let's cover the sibling dynamic today, okay? So you might know my sister is sensitive. She's a highly sensitive person, and so I grew up with a sensitive sister, and I have a brother as well, and I'm the oldest of 3. And while I will share some of my personal experiences later in today's conversation, it's very important that that you understand that everything that I teach is balanced by my personal experience. Maybe what's the word? That's where I get my passion and conviction. But the evidence that we use, the science that we use, the research that we use stems from the fact that I have a master's degree, that I've studied this for years, that I've worked in the mental health field for over a decade. I've trained therapists. I've been trained by significantly knowledgeable researchers in the field of mental health. And then I've worked I've worked as a parent consultant and a parent coach for many years as well. So everything that I speak about is backed by my experience as a professional, and then obviously my personal experience really just swayed me in this direction to offer the support to parents and to dive in to this passion. Once I learned about the highly sensitive trait beyond my master's degree, I was able to start to experience more of a mind-blowing moment that it just really helped me understand what made me a Shannon Whisperer, which is what I was affectionately called in my household, my sister's name, and what allowed me to naturally support my sister in different ways. But then what also led to a lot of frustration in my childhood as well as in my adulthood, trying to support my sister. And that just furthered my passion in being able to help parents break out of this cycle before it starts. At the gravity that we dealt with it, and continue to deal with it in my family's dynamic. So we'll get to that later, because that's not really what is going to be super important for you, right? In breaking out of the pattern. It's not my story. One person's story doesn't impact whether or not you can break out of this cycle. You impact whether or not you can break out of this cycle. And so I understand that it's important that you know who I am and why I know what I do, and why I know what I do is going to work for the families that we know it works with. And to connect with me. And it's also true that your family is a different dynamic than mine, though I can imagine there are some parallels, because there are parallels in all highly sensitive children's families. And this is where a system comes into play in terms of understanding patterns. I've been doing this for over a decade, so I've been able to observe patterns in different family dynamics, not just what happened in my family, and how I break out of it for my child and me, and the challenges that we have in everyday today life without the meltdown cycle and parenting a sensitive kid. Because it's not just about breaking the generational cycle for one particular family, right? We're talking about being able to break out of this pattern consistently and to do it for hundreds of families. And not every child, especially when you think about hundreds of children collectively, feel the same way. But you might have heard from your other children, the non-sensitive kiddo, right? That they are trying their best to notice that your sensitive kid is having a hard time or really struggling, and they're trying to be patient in all of these major behaviors that I discussed earlier, right? Running, hitting, kicking, screaming. And they know that it's wrong to hit, kick, run away when mom or dad are talking. And yet, and they follow through with those directions because perhaps it's easier for them to regulate their emotions or to hold it together. Those two are not the same thing. And with that being said, there can be a lot of resentment. We've seen and heard parents of sensitive kids and their other children saying things like, "You know what, Mom? I'm trying really hard to be patient with my brother here, but I really just want to punch him in the face." And when your child says that to you about your other child, it can be incredibly jarring to experience that. And knowing that experience is something that our parents deal with often is one thing. And hearing it from your kid and actually having your child tell you that is another, right? Because, and I want to speak to that, because the internal rage of living in chaos, which is what's going on in a household that's stuck in meltdown cycle, is pervasive. Children who are witnessing the siblings' meltdown cycle are scared, they're nervous, they're overwhelmed, they're frustrated, just like you are. This is not a typical family dynamic that is built and designed to be to create healthy adults. And it's really important for you to notice that your child is not growing up in a safe and peaceful home. And it's something for you to address for the entire family, not just for your one child in question. To notice that your sensitive child might be the one screaming from the rooftops that there's a problem in the family dynamic. But every child in the household is struggling in that, and I'm here to tell you that from personal experience as well as from professional experience. So it's important, right? Because the struggle for you as a parent is obviously very hard, because you can't support your non-sensitive kid by saying things like, "Hey, I get it. You know, Sally's really struggling, and I just don't know how to help her." Right? And you can't say things like, "Yep, you know what? She's working through some things. We'll figure it out." And say that with a straight face if you don't know how to figure it out. Your other children will read that uncertainty off your face, even if they're not highly sensitive. And this creates a lot of aggravation. It also creates a lot of worry for non-highly sensitive kids. And non-highly sensitive kids will deal with that worry differently than sensitive kids usually. It might not lead to meltdowns, but it might lead to threats. It might lead to aggravation. It might lead to anger, or disconnection. And this is the typical pattern we see. Basically just trying not to rock the boat. And disconnection from need in the household, trying to manage your own needs because you can't expect your parents to be around and available when you need them because they're busy with their sensitive sibling. So this challenge, right, might pose a couple of options for you. You might decide to chastise your sensitive kid and say, "Look, you know, can't you see this is your brother's soccer game, and you know, he's making it to the tournament, and we don't have time for you to refuse to get out of the car. He's got to go." And you can decide to try to teach empathy in that moment, if your child is refusing to follow through on something that's important to siblings. You know, he waits all the time for you to, to get it together. Even during the school days, sometimes we're late because you can't get it together. Today, you can be someone who gets in the car and gets out of the car on time, because can't you see this is important to your sibling? Those dynamics, that activity might be something that you might want, that experience might be something that you want to engage in. Might have been something that actually came out of your mouth in more than one occasion, in exasperation, frustration, or in just pure attempt to teach your kid to think about someone other than themselves. And that level of exasperation is common in parents who are stuck in the meltdown cycle, and it's common for sensitive kids to experience shame-based lectures in this dynamic. And honestly, there's no judgment here in terms of being able to share what's going on with you and address it, because it's exasperating. You know, the guilt of noticing that your other children are not getting the attention or the prioritization that you hope to give them is incredibly important. You know, you've seen how we've coached parents of very young children where there's serious safety concerns, like a highly sensitive child at 4 who's aggressive and punching a baby, right? You might have heard Tony's story, or other families that we've worked with whose kids are 5 and 2, and 5-year-old is jumping on the 2-year-old because they're just super excited and they want to play, and they can't read the 2-year-old's face of, "Get off of me. This is scary. You're too big. I don't like this." And then that leads to aggravation and frustration. And then obviously the intensity then can create a meltdown for the 5-year-old. "I just want to play. Why won't my little brother play with me?" And that intensity can then lead to a shame-based meltdown when you have said, "Get off your brother. Come on. He's little. Don't you get it?" And this is true for sensitive teens. You know, teens who you notice need to be participating in the family, are refusing to go to their younger siblings. Like conferences or what's the word I'm looking for? Performances. I gave the example of a sports game earlier, so I lost my train of thought there. But you get what I'm saying, right? So I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the music performance. I don't want to go to the soccer tournament. It's going to be boring. I don't know. What if I don't want to be around a lot of people, any of that a sensitive teen stuck in the refusal isolation cycle might say, which can really damage the relationship. You can have a skillful, non-sensitive teen who is dealing with their sensitive teen who's just quitting at life, and they see that as such a frustration. And you might see that your teens are trying to your younger teen or your older teen is trying to encourage your sensitive teen to get with it. Come on, man, like this isn't that big of a deal. You're missing out on life here, and it's sad to watch. It's sad to watch an isolated, sensitive teen from a sibling's perspective get into behaviors that are ineffective, and to get into patterns of just completely checking out of life, or just watching your parents getting into arguments over and over again in the same problem. And it just really makes you want to hide, let alone get into a situation where you're screaming or frustrated at them, and it's bleeding out in different circumstances. So, you might decide to handle all of that by addressing it through lecture, by addressing it by trying to call attention to how they're mistreating their siblings, and that's not cool. And you might also decide to ask your non-HSC to shove their emotions to the side. She feels bigger feelings, and this is just how she is. I don't really know how to get her out of it, and you're yelling at her makes it worse. Obviously, a non-sensitive teen yelling at a sensitive teen is going to make it worse, but it's not your non-sensitive kid's problem, quite frankly, to have to solve that emotional regulation problem in your sensitive kid. That is your problem. You're the parent. And so when I speak about the responsibility, it's the responsibility of your sensitive child to act on the empathy that we know they have. But they cannot do that unless they have the skills to manage their own emotional dysregulation, unless they have the skills to notice that they are in panic mode and decrease that panic mode enough to see the faces of other people around them, take that in as something they should act upon in a skillful way, and then not let that emotion of responsibility, of shame, of embarrassment, or care or compassion overwhelm them and compound, be the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Which is what goes on in the meltdown cycle when highly sensitive kids have no skills. You've heard me say this. Go watch or listen to my trainings on manipulation and counteracting that belief that your kiddo doesn't have empathy. Because sensitive kids are by nature more empathetic, and by nature in the meltdown cycle are stuck in not being able to demonstrate that empathy. So spontaneous apologies never happen. Inhibition of impulses don't happen because they are so overwhelmed. And that intensity is something that it's important for you to notice. You don't jump to the conclusion that your sensitive kid is not empathetic. And when you try to teach empathy to your non-highly sensitive kid by saying, hey, don't worry about your feelings, only worry about the big feelings going on in the home for the one kid that I'm drained by, that obviously doesn't create empathy. It creates self-preservation thoughts and self-protection thoughts that your non-highly sensitive kid is going to have to deal with. And so you might think that either of those are good solutions, but the third option is breaking out of the meltdown cycle. And that's what is really going to turn away this challenge for your whole family. Being able to break out of this pattern consistently is something that you have to do as a parent. Your sibling, your kid's sibling relationship can be spared from this strife. You can stop playing referee, okay? And most people don't realize that meltdown cycle is actually a family dynamic issue. Everybody in the family needs to take on their own part, and nobody in the family should be overperforming for other people in the family, including you for your child, by sweeping their big emotional behaviors under the rug, by trying to make it better, by forcing apologies. All of that is keeping your whole family stuck in this circumstance. And so when we think about this, the key component is ensuring that everybody understands that the major behaviors you're dealing with, running, kicking, screaming, shutting down, threatening, all of this, verbal aggression, physical aggression, risky behaviors, and checking out behaviors, all of that is symptoms of the meltdown cycle. This is behavior that is absolutely reducible, and we've helped parents break out of this pattern, especially on a daily dynamic, in as little as 8 weeks. And when we see parents be able to do that, it's important for you to notice that there's a two-way street here. Your child is missing skills, and you are the one who needs to teach your child those skills. And so I'm going to speak about that because when we think about the fact that your child is missing skills, this is something that can be really missed in the meltdown cycle. It might feel obvious, but when we think about the meltdown cycle, and here's where I'm going to share a little bit more about my own personal experience, the component that your child is missing skills is important for you to notice, because when we're stuck in the meltdown cycle, it can be easy to blame the personality of the child as dramatic, as a whiner, as a complainer, as just somebody who just won't handle change, somebody who can't handle change, somebody who is easily overwhelmed. Even Elaine Aron naming that as part of the trait in the 4 components of the highly sensitive trait: depth of processing, easily overstimulated, right? As number 2. The other 2 are emotionally responsive, reactive, and more empathetic. That's number 3, and then sensitive to subtleties. And so when we look at number 2, easily overstimulated, easily overwhelmed, the important component is that easy is relative. When you address the intensity of the meltdown cycle and you reduce the intensity of that meltdown cycle, then your child can handle overwhelming moments without meltdown, okay? Without needing to leave early and things of that nature. So I want to cover that, all right? Because growing up, I remember my sister not being able to participate in swim camps, in swim lessons. I remember my sister not being able to participate in family activities because she was stressed out. She was worried about things. I remember the screaming that happened at home between the two, mainly my mom and my sister when they were upset. And then I remember the screaming that happened between myself and my mom because I was angry. I was really angry as a teenager. And my mom was doing the very best she could and better than she was parented. So it's not a judgment. My mom was, both my parents know what I do. They know that I speak about my childhood every once in a while. And they know that what I do is for a living, had that been available to them, they would have jumped into those options in a heartbeat. It just wasn't available to them. So there's no judgment or shame or blame from a regret standpoint, because they didn't have this level of support available to them growing up and raising my sister. And now that it is available to you, it's critically important that you break out of this pattern immediately, because there is no I turned out okay, that happened in my family, I turned out okay dynamic that is available to your sensitive kid. So if you grew up in a household where your parent is a yeller, or your parent used other strategies like timeouts or groundings or lectures or writing lines, etc., traditional parenting methods that don't need to have included spanking often or ever, I want to ask yourself, when you say you turned out okay, do you self-identify as a perfectionist? Do you see yourself as a people pleaser? Do you see yourself as somebody who can panic easily or has trouble sleeping? And then I want to ask, do you see yourself as a workaholic? Somebody who really struggles with disappointing others, who can't handle stress without raising your voice? And then I ask you, is that the okay you want for your child, for your non-highly sensitive child that you're raising? Because knowing that that's how I turned out in my early adulthood, that's absolutely not something that I want for my child, nor do the clients that we work with want for their children. That is not the best case scenario in living life for many parents. People-pleasing, workaholism, type A, self-sacrifice, martyrdom is an ineffective way to live, right? Not being able to advocate for your own needs, not be able to live a balanced life, thinking that your life can't be balanced if you want to be financially successful or professionally successful. is not an experience that's going to serve you. Your stress is going to play out in your family dynamic. And so you might understand that, but it might be hard for you to notice how that starts, how that pattern starts in childhood. And it started for me in childhood because I learned and through traditional parenting and how I was parented that big emotions are not okay. And that if you have a big emotion, it's your problem to fix. And it's also your problem to keep your parents happy. And I'm saying this in a blunt way because I'm not going to, give you 20 years of childhood. Because I made mistakes in college that I was parented and lectured about. So I'm not saying that that's just like once I hit 18, my parents were like, have fun, have at it. Like we're no longer your parent. And all of that dynamic is relevant here. For me, early on in my young adulthood, it was incredibly stressful to manage my relationships because all I was able to do was perform, and perform in a way that got me the results that I wanted. A's, 4.0 GPA, etc. And that meant that I didn't really have a lot of emotional availability for loving relationships or for friendships. My friendships were pretty superficial, and I didn't need intimacy. And I'm not talking just about like sexual relationship intimacy. I'm talking about vulnerability, sharing my worries with a person who cares, supporting people around me who are sad. Being able to do that in a way that isn't just me listening and letting them dump on it, right? Because that's like a very newbie therapist thing to do, just having somebody vent in your office for an hour and saying like, yeah, this is important to you. That's why talk therapy is so draining and frustrating, because many therapists don't move beyond that skill set to, or they move straight to like, let's fix it. Come on, here's some skills. I learned skills in this new training, and here, like, let me teach you that. So the whole component around trying to fix people was something that I learned in childhood. I learned that it was my job to be a fixer, and that only got me so far because I wasn't focused on being able to feel fully emotionally secure in myself. And that took a lot of work. It took a lot of personal development work. It took a lot of emotional development work and spiritual development work, and being able to lead parents out of that dynamic early is now my life's work and our mission here at MTC. Because when you think about it, and if you haven't heard my story, and I go into this more in depth, but my sister engaged in some pretty significant life-threatening behaviors. I came home from college and saw her. She was skin and bones. She had anorexia. And so she developed that in young adulthood. She was in college, or right out of college, if I do the math right, because I was coming home from grad school. So she was right out of college. And so you might say, oh, she turned out right because she graduated college. But she graduated college near dead. Skin and bones with nobody really noticing the slow decline, because when you're stuck in the meltdown cycle, you don't see from outside your experience. And so she's, coming home every weekend to mitigate stress and to decompress from life, literally. And my parents didn't see it. They didn't see how skinny she had gotten. They didn't see, because all they heard was how stressed she was, how sad her life was, how overwhelming her life was. And they would just try to solve the problem of the weekend. Now that behavior, that cycle they were in, it started in childhood. They started getting stuck in that cycle in childhood. Helping her manage school, helping her manage drama with friends, helping her manage dynamics around things that she didn't think she was capable of, and just constantly trying to encourage her to solve problems in a non-highly sensitive way. And she was sensitive, so we all misinterpreted my sister's needs as her being dramatic, that she was an alien. That she wasn't part of the family. There's a lot of subtle rejection going on in the household. With that being said, because I didn't know how to manage my own emotions, I also learned to reject myself. I also learned to resent emotions. and to resent the dynamic. And so when I got frustrated with my sister for doing silly sisterly things, I got really, really pissed, like really, really angry. I would yell, and just blow up, because that was obviously a side effect of the issues that we had at hand, is that nobody knew how to manage emotions. And that was more relevant in high school. So I had hormones, to add to that, but that was not the key. Teenagers can manage anger without losing their minds. That was not the cause of my anger concerns. The cause was that I didn't learn the skills, and that they just weren't made available to me. And so instead, what was made available to me was the lesson that I needed to stuff my emotions and handle it if I had any, and that all anger is bad. And so here's where we're at now, right? I'm in my mid 30s, and I guess you would say mid to late 30s. And obviously, I've made a lot of changes in my life in order to have a loving family of my own, and relationship, married relationship of my own. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and a lot of sadness and worry and concern to get there. And my sister never made it out. She did not. She's not financially successful, to the date of this recording. She's not independent, and she's not emotionally independent, and she's not emotionally successful either. And that's devastating, man. It is really hard to watch happen, and to have to create boundaries around a loved one, who I just don't really think that I can have a clear relationship with her. And a lot of that frustration, I dissipate on my own with my own skills, but I have to set really clear boundaries around how often I speak with her, how often we converse, and what I get into, what kind of communication I get into, because it's just, it's been the same thing over and over again for 20 years. That gets tiring. And unfortunately, I have to say that this is not unique to my family's circumstances. I've got 10 people on the team here at MTC, in various capacities, and many of them have highly sensitive siblings. And some of their siblings might be financially successful in the sense that they're independent, and can pay, they might own a house, or are married, and are homemakers, and contribute, and their spouse pays the bills. But the emotional unavailability is still true there. So sure, my sister's no longer demonstrating anorexia. She was able to break out of that pattern, thankfully, thank God. But so her life's not necessarily in danger all of the time. But it's still not an awesome life to be living, honestly. And I'm not here to be judgmental of that experience. It's just very obvious. She lives in a lot of stress, and my parents worry about her all the time, and have had to set pretty significant boundaries around their relationship with her at this age, for her at this age as well, just given how many years they've tried to support her in different ways that have either been enabling, or just like highly ineffective, toxic for everybody. And I say that in the sense that it's just the pendulum that I speak to you guys about, which is the pressuring, you got to get it together now, panic mode, to, okay, you can't get it together, you'll never get it together, so here, let me hold your hand and help you. And that dynamic is the toxicity I'm talking about. My parents aren't abusive. They never engaged in, purposeful neglect or anything like that. The emotional neglect, by simply lack of knowledge of what helps parents of sensitive kids, seriously damaged the relationship that my parents have with my sister. And that's an irrefutable fact. It's not something that anybody in my family would speak to otherwise, or would defend. The opposite. And that's really sad. It is. And it's something that I think about, and being able to hope for change, and noticing my role in that. As a therapist, it's incredibly important that I not become my sister's therapist. Though in my early adulthood, I definitely tried. In my early adolescence, in my early adulthood, before I even became a trained therapist, I definitely tried, and it's exhausting. And so when I think about the the sadness, the grief that my family has been through about this. And that doesn't even speak to just the daily sadness that my sister goes through, living such a hard life. Um, it's a heavy weight that you have to figure out how to personally choose to dissipate, because you can't take action in a way that you want to have action. So say, for example, obviously, denying that my sister's sensitive and saying that she should have it all together would be just like if she had cancer and was dying and I'd be like, no, you don't, right? Come on, come on, get it together, right? Obviously I can't do that. I'm not doing that. And we don't teach that for our clients either. You have to acknowledge the sensitivity, and then you have to figure out where you fit in the role. And for parents of young children, you fit in the role as teacher, as well as leader. And that means that your sensitive kid is here to learn from you. And they need to take action, but you need to create that environment for them to take action. That allows them to thrive. And you can't do that by just throwing them to the wolves, telling them to suck it up, or telling them that, that their siblings are waiting for them, and that it's all their fault if they don't get it together, and their siblings are suffering because of that, because it's not a child's job to parent their siblings. And that goes both ways, right? So for me to be in that position, not intentionally put there, right? Like I said before, can't speak higher enough to my excellent relationship with my parents. Love them. They care for me in emotional ways, and they have given me so many things throughout the years, and I give back as well in our relationship, and we have a really great relationship. And that is likely due to a clear understanding of what was my emotional baggage to carry, because I could have easily moved into shame and blame myself in that relationship. And being able to understand that we have such a beautiful privilege as those of us growing up in this generation do, in this day and age of education and attachment theory, education and emotional management science, and education in in personal development, mindset support, etc., neuroscience, all of that. None of that was available to my parents. All of that was tucked away in professional journals and fancy college libraries. And while my parents have college degrees and advanced degrees, they were studying something else, right? So it's not. My mom's a nurse, my dad's an accountant. So there's no. There's really not a lot of overlap in that understanding of child development, that they would have been writing papers on this stuff in school enough to apply it, or have the knowledge to apply it. So then when it came time for my mom to read Dr. Green's book, The Explosive Child, decades ago, when it first came out, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. It's not enough for our clients now. And plenty of people will talk about his work. It doesn't break out of the meltdown cycle. It might give you a framework that is pretty complicated, quite frankly, but it doesn't break out of the meltdown cycle, because you need support, you need troubleshooting, you need to be able to talk to somebody when you have that might work for you, but you're the psychiatrist here, so I don't have the information that you have in your brain to pivot to creatively problem solve. And so this is why we work with our clients when we do. We answer their questions all the time. It's not just an appointment delivery system, because the work that we do, you need to be able to talk to a professional regularly, and to do that in a way that doesn't keep you panicking, and keep you in a crisis intervention cycle too. So the same thing going on in terms of trying to contact somebody a professional who doesn't know how to break out of the cycle. They can be in the same response if they're treating themselves as your 911 response team, because in the meltdown cycle, there are a few things that are emergencies, and there are a lot of things that are not emergencies that feel like emergencies. And when you're an expert and you can solve the problem consistently, you've done this for many families, I'm able to know, my team and we're able to know what's an emergency, what's not. And we're able to help people slow down, because if you're in panic mode, parenting consistently, it just keeps you draining your emotional experiences, and you don't have the energy to withstand holding a limit effectively later on in the day. This is why you're swinging from, okay, fine, you can have it, I'm tired, to, no, enough is enough, I can't deal with this anymore, I'm all done, giving you more chances. And neither of those approaches work. So, and like I said, I have, it's a parallel to what I saw, anecdotally I can assess going on in my parents' dynamic. And all the families that we've helped break out of this cycle as well. So when we think about being able to do this consistently, right, what actually works? You need to be able to have a clear understanding of what is your kid's personality, and then what is their symptom of a meltdown cycle that just shows up regularly, and you're calling it their personality, right? So personally, we would consider my sister to be dramatic. We would consider her to be different than us. And we were using her ineffective behaviors to dictate that, and we called it her personality. And we see this often for parents stuck in the meltdown cycle. Children who whine, who cry, who are quick to name the negative, who are quick to count all the terrible things that happened that day. Even when you go to like a carnival, and children who will say it's the worst day ever at the end of a lovely experience like that, even though they had beaming smiles throughout the whole day because they didn't get an extra slushie at the end when you got them ice cream an hour ago, right? When you walk past the slushie booth. And your children stuck in the meltdown cycle will categorize an entire day as terrible. And that might show up differently for sensitive kids versus non-sensitive kids. So sensitive kids, it might show up as the negativity ledger. This is something that I affectionately call, where a kid is just ticking those boxes. They are just counting, keeping track of all of the bad things that happened to them that day. And they're not anchoring, believing, and sitting in the awesomeness of the day and the joy. And that feels fleeting, and it feels like a fluke, like you can't depend on it. This is true for you as a parent. If you feel like your kids' emotional experiences that are positive are flukes and you can't depend on it as well, that's also a symptom of the meltdown cycle. So you need to be able to break out of that pattern of deciding the way your kid relates to the world is their personality. It's not true. It's symptom. The next thing is, and to go back to that, you can this shows up in less panicked ways in non-highly sensitive kids as pragmatism, realism, tell it like I see it. So this was me in my early 20s. In my adolescence as well. In how I spoke with adults. Yeah. Pollyanna is great, but life is kind of tough, right? Relating to those memes in adolescence, you might have caught a few. Life sucks and then you die. Like, quote that, I'm pretty sure that was a quote on my AOL profile for a couple of years in college, like my AIM profile. If not, it was something that I would say every once in a while. The pragmatism of that is basically somebody who is okay living in mediocrity and living a life that just basically gets you most of what you want, but not everything. And when you don't shoot for your dreams to be achieved, then you don't achieve them, right? So that's really important to understand how this plays out in emotional experiencing, even if you're not having meltdowns yourself, or even if your other children are not having meltdowns themselves. Pragmatism is the thief of joy. In addition to comparison, to edit Theodore Roosevelt's words here. So the other piece around the importance that you need to be able to do, so break out of the pattern of calling your kid dramatic, of thinking that's part of their personality. You got to break out of the pattern of trying to teach without play. You need to playfully teach. Your child learns through play. That is the language of children. You need to be able to learn how to speak the foreign language of sensitive children if you don't speak it fluently yourself. Even if you're highly sensitive, the way your child experiences the world isn't likely how you want them to experience the world, and it might not be related to how you experience the world. So you need to fix that and address that as well. And work on ways to teach without shaming, as I mentioned earlier today. And that needs to be systematic, so your kid doesn't feel like they have to fix all the things, like they're relating to the world, that the whole world needs to be fixed, right? You can't approach changing your child's behavior from your own negativity ledger if they also use negativity ledgers to name their days. So that has to be systematic as well. And the best way to do that is to work with professionals who've helped you, who've helped hundreds of families do that. That's us here at MTC. No other professional has our level of expertise and is able to do this in this swift amount of time around the world. And I know that for sure because we have clients around the world who are able to speak about the fact that they've tried all kinds of things, working with coaches, working with therapists, working with pediatricians, reading books, etc. And that doesn't break you out of the pattern. Working with experts breaks you out of the pattern. So I encourage you to go ahead and have a conversation with us. Figure out what you need to do to get from A to B, right? If your goal is to stop suffering in however many ways your family is suffering, and then to live a life where you're not just satisfied by going to the park without a fight, but living a life where you know that you guys can spontaneously go on vacations, that you can even handle a move. One of our clients just celebrated that they were so excited. They've been thinking about moving, and they had moved before, and it was such a horrendously stressful experience for their family. They had conceded to the thought that they can't move ever again until their kids grow. And that level of trapped experience, even if you don't know where you're going to move to, or if you ever want to move again, just that level of feeling trapped in your own home is incredibly stressful, right? There's a stuck experience you have to not being able to grow. And this family, in our work together, in the middle of our 8 weeks together, was able to identify their child as fully capable of handling challenge, of handling feeling thrown for a loop, a disruption in their routine, to the max, what a move does, right? And parents started to dream again. They started to dream about where they would move to and what community they would live in and how they would thrive. The whole family would thrive there. And they stopped thinking that this is just all there is. That's what I'm talking about when we speak about goals, right? Your goal might be just make it, like I said, just making it to the park. But that's not where we stop, man. That's a day-to-day expectation that every family should deserve, right? What I'm talking about is being able to do this consistently, so much so that that's no longer a feeling like an anomaly, or something that you're going to revel in, unless you're truly connected to feeling daily gratitude, if you will. But instead, you're going to be able to appreciate that on the same level that you appreciate any other physical attributes you have that you often take for granted, right? And that's what I'm talking about here. Being able to have regular everyday experiences that a family with not highly sensitive kids who are not stuck in any meltdown cycles are dealing with. Picking up, going to the park, and it being, a fun thing to do. That's every day. And then we dream bigger than that. And once you observe what's bigger for you, and if we can help you get there, we've helped families do that. Or if that's if your dreams match up to what we do, what our expectation is, and what we think your family is capable of, then we share with you exactly how how our work would apply within your family dynamic to get you from A to B. And then if your family needs to go from A to B, but in the middle there needs to be a stop in between that we don't help with, then we would just point you in that direction, okay? If your family has experienced traumatic hardship, there's other dynamics in the family that can run the gamut in all kinds of ways, then we point you in the direction of what evidence-based, either mental health treatment or coaching approach you need to take, depending on the circumstances, before we were a fit or because we're not a fit at all. And that conversation has to happen on the phone, because we're not here to make false promises that what we do is going to work for everybody. But we're also not here to create false hope that what we do is going to work for everybody, nor just try to work with everybody when it's not a fit. That's out of integrity of what we do here at MTC. So we are happy to serve you. We are happy to make that a mutual conversation and invitation and application process. And we do that on the phone. Go ahead over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk or meganthompsoncoaching.com/teen talk with your teen, and you would have that conversation. We're happy to discuss it and move you in the right direction so that you can break out of this pattern immediately, because no family was put on this earth to be miserable. We look forward to